Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a presentation about eye care, but the first question is, do you hear me well? I take this as a yes then. Okay. So, patient and adherence and compliance in eye care. If you had asked anyone in your plane this morning or last night, why are you coming to Barcelona? Well, everyone would say, I'm interested in new technology, I want to see process optimization, I want to see this and that. But if you're really honest with yourselves, at the end of the day, it's the patient and the consumer here. That's who's sending you to Barcelona. Because you want to develop products, you want to improve products. Why do you want to do that? Because they are supposed to be bought by or prescribed to consumers and patients. So that's why patient and adherence is important, even on a meeting like CPhI. If we take a look at glaucoma, and I don't want you to be ophthalmologist, but glaucoma is a serious disease. You actually lose your eyesight. Yeah? And it's diagnosed fairly easy. It's not a big deal to diagnose glaucoma. And drugs are available. But if you look how glaucoma is treated and what happens with glaucoma, there's estimates that people are not taking their drugs to an extent that goes up to 60%. Now, can you imagine all these expensive medicines? Well, they may be cheaper in some countries of the world than in other countries of the world, but still they are expensive. The compliance rate goes down to 40%. 60% of people don't take their medication properly. So compliance is an issue. Patient adherence is an issue. What is it people use mostly? Probably some of you even make eye drops, so you're familiar with what is called the 3-piece droppers. Very simple devices. It's a soft bottle that has an insert, and that insert makes sure a nice drop is being dispensed. And then all it takes is a screw cap, ideally with a tamper-evident sealing ring or something like this, and that's your package. It's called 3-piece or traditional bottle or standard device, whatever. Authorities know how to deal with it. At least we thought so, till this spring, when the FDA issued a warning. These bottles, they have been used for years, and all of a sudden people realize that these little tamper-evident rings fall off. Wow, what did you do all these years, dear regulator? So it's not as easy as it seems. Now, these are the standard packaging solutions that are available widely today. We spoke about the disease, for example, glaucoma. And glaucoma is typically a disease of older people. So do you know your target audience? Do you know the people you're talking to? Do you know the people who take your drug products? We are all pretty young, some more, some less, but pretty young. So we know how to use our hands. But if you grow older, the hand starts to lose sensitivity and control. So it's getting increasingly difficult to squeeze a bottle. The finger dexterity degrades, obviously. These are other factors of aging. And this movement, something we can do at almost any force at any time, this movement is getting increasingly difficult over the years. So squeezing a bottle is not as easy. And the thinner the bottle is, the more difficult it becomes. There's sufficient data on that available. So, what do they say if you ask them? If you ask patients who receive eye care medications, sometimes they complain about drugs not being easy to dose. They need training. The pharmacists love that because it costs them time. Often, the drops are way too large, or the amount that is being dispensed is way too large. So you get all that liquid on your face rather than in your eye only. What is an additional problem is combination treatments. Like when you suffer from glaucoma, you may also need two substance classes. That makes it a combination product. If you take one combination product, or one drop that contains 2 APIs, fine, you're better off. But typically, your ophthalmologist will prescribe you 2 drugs, so you have even 2 bottles to use. They behave differently, so it's increasingly difficult. Again, a very important topic of my talk today is the preservatives. Preservatives create severe side effects. They can't be underestimated. And of course, if you combine more products, so if you take a glaucoma drug of this class and another one of that class, you add the side effects you encounter when you have preservatives. A lot of studies have been done on that issue, and I love to quote the group around Professor Baudouin. They have done a lot of work on this in the Institut de la Vision in France, but also in other centers in Korea, in America. There's a lot of work has been done. And this is just to subsumize. And you know what this is? This is dry eye disease. So basically, by treating a patient A glaucoma patient, by treating a glaucoma patient, you give him dry eye disease, at least the symptoms. And that comes to a point where it really, when you talk to people, it hurts as bad that when they blink, it's like sandpaper on their eyes. And that's what the preservatives do in eye care medications. So it can't be underestimated. Are there any alternatives to drops? Well, it's difficult to say. There's these implants, but the question is how popular they will ever become, because you need a specialist to put them into the eye. What happens to the knuckle rubber? It's going to lose that device. So these are possibilities, these are options, but these are not very practical, not very hands-on. So what can we do to increase compliance? What can we do to make patients adhere to their treatments in a better way? The first thing is, of course, whatever device you give to them, it has to be easy. No explanations, because the more you explain, the more they forget. So it has to be an easy device. We spoke about the real bad side effects of preservatives, so you have to get preservatives out of your medication, some way or the other. You should ideally use products that combine actives, so you don't have the addition of the negative aspects. If you always need to see an eye care specialist to get your medication, like it would be the case with surgery or inserts, that's also not very helpful. So specialists should not necessarily be needed for each and every single application. And of course, the drug or the product should be available on easy distribution channels. So that all this doesn't necessarily apply to inserts. That's why I'm listing these points here. So, how do we tackle the preservative issue? Since years, some people call it the bottle pack system, some call it BFS, Blow Feel and Seal. There's a lot of different words for this, but basically it's unit dose vials made of a soft plastic material, and these vials contain 1 dose. They have been on the market for years, so consumers are pretty familiar with these, consumers and patients. They're comparably easy to use. This is a typical instruction you would find in these packs. The problem is, like I said, the older you get, the more difficult that grip here gets. And these vials are very thin. They are like 2 millimeters, maybe 3 millimeters. So it's not as easy as it seems to open these and to squeeze the liquid out. From a manufacturing point of view, and we hear a lot about processes on this show, from a manufacturing point of view, the problem is that you have a lot of overflow, a lot of overfill, which is not necessarily a problem when you use an artificial tears product, but when you have an expensive glaucoma treatment, you don't want to waste 30% of your expensive API. So that all sort of is like a negative to the blow, feel, and seal process. It's widely established, and it works pretty well from a preservative point of view, but from a process point of view, it's not as easy as it should be. This is basically the typical situation, how someone would feel. Now, we know this lady personally. She's pretty young, so she can handle it. But like I said, when you get older, this grip is very tricky. Now, if you go into unpreserved, what is it the authorities want from you, and what is it you have to do? There's quite a few things. The first point is, other than other treatments, eye care has very, very little regulations as of today. There's very little guidelines. So authorities are not really familiar with the new technologies. Of course, they know the Blow, Feel, and Seal program because they've been around, but everything beyond that is sort of new to regulators. You have to convince regulators to create mechanical barriers, because if you don't want any bacteria, CFU, virus, whatever, to get into your solution, a mechanical barrier is the only thing you can do. And you have to convince them that this is safe. So you have to provide data, you have to design studies to do that. Your microbial function has to be equal or even superior. Obviously, it needs to be filled sterile, there's no question. And a relatively new aspect is there, which is the oligodynamic components, silver ions and the likes. If these come in, you have to show that there's no compatibility issue with the formulation. We've recently learned, that's pretty new findings, that authorities don't accept silver ions in devices when these devices claim to be preservative-free or to allow preservative-free medications. They're very critical. Basically, they say the silver is now part of the preservative function. But that's very recent findings. Our company, we have developed a system. I don't want to go into detail, but just to show you briefly how it looks. Basically, what you have is you have a standard dropper, like the ones I showed you in one of the earlier pictures. So it's a bottle, it's a soft material, a low-density PE, very soft to press, and then there's this structure on top, which we refer to as the OSD, the ophthalmic squeeze dispenser. If you do an X-ray, you find there's a membrane, and that's held in place by a spring, and you see that filter. Oops, a filter. Oh my God, how can you do sterile filtration of liquids with filter? You can't. That's why we don't do it. This filter is filtering the air. The surrounding air that gets into the container is filtered by that membrane here. No liquid ever passes that filter. You see, this here is a unidirectional valve, basically. So what it does is when the pressure increases, it retracts, opens the channel, and the liquid can flow. I'm going to show you in some of the next slides some more details. The technology is, in the meantime, established as tip seal technology. It's nothing new anymore, but the combination as such is pretty novel. So here you can see it in a bit more detail. When the patient or the consumer squeezes the bottle, there's a pressure increase inside, and it's a little bit like when you breathe. Your diaphragm moves up and down, and this is what this component here does. It moves up and down and allows liquid to leave the dispenser, to leave the orifice. However, since you have a liquid flow, you could say a hydraulic pressure, since you have that flow, it's like a one-way street. There's no way for bacteria to grow in at the same time. It's totally impossible. Or for any other CFUs, not only limited to bacteria. So that's basically, in a nutshell, how the OSD works. This in a bit more detail. We spoke about this. And then at the end of the actuation, when the pressure is gone, you see the tip is sealed again from the inside. So again, nothing can grow in. It's impossible. While the air that needs to be put into the container to equilibrate the pressure, the air actually goes in through that filter membrane here. Authorities are going to roast you alive when it comes to microbiology. They want to know everything. You have to use tests that have been described in the literature. You have to take challenging germs. You can't just take some harmless guys. Pseudomonas, for example, is the plastic germ. I mean, to challenge plastic connections. These tests you need to provide because, in the meantime, the authorities are aware of all these tests. So it's nothing new for them. Yeah? So that's the basis. And if you are not able to provide such data because the supplier of your system won't support you or doesn't have properly designed studies, you will be in trouble. You will be in trouble in front of the agencies. So an example of a microbiological assessment that is well known by the agencies is what is referred to as a such-called tip seal integrity test. And in a nutshell, you have growth medium. So not formulation, you have growth medium. And then you dip this device into the bacteria suspension and you squeeze it, and then the valve opens. Remember what I showed you, the membrane retracts, so the valve is open. And if there was any chance for Pseudomonas, this is a Pseudomonas suspension with a high concentration, if there was any chance for Pseudomonas to grow in, you'd see it, I'd say after let's not exaggerate, like after an hour you would see turbidity in your solution. So it's a very simple test, it's extremely challenging, but it shows you results very, very quickly. We spoke about the filter briefly. The filter is supposed to clean the ambient air that gets into the container. And to do that, a test was designed, closure ventilation integrity test. That test is done with particles that have been loaded with spores of Aspergillus, I think. So it's a dry air germ. It's not Pseudomonas. And what you do is you activate the device in that aerosol chamber. And by doing so, you suck this contaminated air onto the filter membrane. And again, if there was any effect of CFUs growing through the membrane, you'd see that immediately. These are challenge tests, and these tests is something you as a pharmaceutical company don't necessarily, have to do, but what you have to do is you have to repeat these with your drug product. You have to show to any agency that your drug product in this pack, the way you made it, is microbiologically safe. And that's the design they know, so that's the design you can refer to, the test design you can refer to. In terms of offering, eye drops or ophthalmic fluids, let's say like this, the natural one, the tear fluid, but also the artificial ones, which are the medications, are next to impossible to predict in their behavior. So you won't be able to predict how precisely my tears are going to behave versus yours. And it's simply because of the different layers in the tear film. They contribute to the properties of that liquid. And of course, that composition is different by individual. But it's also different from drug product to drug product. So you have to test, you have to see which is the precise behavior of that liquid in order to design a device. Now, for this particular system here, the squeeze force can be adjusted depending on the formulation. We can play a little bit with the flow control, which is basically preventing a stream to come out. All these kind of things are possible without, and that's important, introducing new materials. So there's no request for additional stabilities or the like. Of course, there's different bottle sizes. That's a company from Germany who makes these bottles. As of now, there's going to be more manufacturers of this bottle, I would guess, in the near future. There's different ranges of materials in case some incompatibilities could affect. You know that some of these formulations tend to crystallize. There's measures against this. So even if it looks pretty simple from the outside, and I have one sample here, you see it looks pretty simple from the outside, but inside it's quite complex. It's a complex technology. And you may wonder, is this the future? What is this guy telling us? And that's in the public domain here. The world's best-selling eye drop, which is Restasis, it's not approved in Europe, I have to say, is undergoing what is called major packaging change, so the FDA is going to approve this product in this pack these days, I would guess. So yes, it is definitely the future. And of course, it's not the only product. In the meantime, and that's something we like to celebrate on this show, in the meantime, we have more than 100 commercial references. We introduced this device some 5 years ago, November 2011. And it's unprecedented that after 5 years, we have more than 100 different commercial references. And that includes prescription products like, I don't know what, glaucoma treatment, anti-allergy treatments, steroids, but also tears product like hyaluronic acid and the like. So there's a lot of products out there in the meantime with that technology. So it's not that new anymore. And I would love to take the opportunity, first of all, to thank you for your time. And secondly, to take your questions, if you have any. Thank you. Sir.
So many ophthalmic products which are very thick viscous
yes.
product. Do you have any issue with this?
That is one of the problems. I wouldn't be able to tell you until what viscosity range the product works in this technology. So there's no particular limit, like 7 or 10 or 11. We need to really test case by case because the viscosity is only one aspect. There's surface tension, there's shear forces. So it's case by case. It's really case by case.
Playing with that.
Yes. That's part of what we refer to as a service kit. So when you come to us with a new formulation, we would actually, expose that to some testing.
I have just one more question about the performance of it, because you did mention that you have a challenge test on it. There is a limit to how many doses you can deliver from it without compromising the system.
Yes. The bulk of these products come in a 10 ml bottle. So by nature, this is good for a month's supply. All these manufacturers have been able to show, and that's not something we can do, that's something you as a manufacturer or as a marketer have to do. All these people have been able to show that it maintains sterility for at least 90 days. So if you look into the patient information leaflet, it always says 90 days. There's one product, I think it's this one, that goes out to 180 days. So it really depends on the stability data you are able to generate. From our point of view, the 10 mils are the limit. We haven't tested a 50 ml bottle, but we have successfully tested 10 ml bottles.
Just one quick question about the design of it. Like it's very different than the typical ophthalmic tips, because it seems to be very shortened tips. Any difficulties with the patients?
That's a very good question. We did a user study back in 2010, so it's quite some time ago, and I wouldn't say that this user study meets the standards of what FDA asks today. However, it gave us some insight. And if I may quickly flip back to one of the tip, here we go. The tip, you're absolutely right, is comparably short. Now, we spoke to these people, and they said, if the tip, we had some prototypes with longer tips, and they said, oh, that scares me. And that's actually in the literature, when it comes to single-dose devices. Let me quickly try to find that. It's on one of the slides. There's reports on ophthalmic injury associated, no, I don't have it here. But I can send you the link. There's a study that shows a link between injuries and these devices because the tip is too long. So the answer is, which way you do it is wrong or right. So that's how we came up with this relatively short tip.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? If there's no further question, I'd like to invite you to come by, to drop by our booth. And if those of you who have no plans tonight, I know Barcelona is a wonderful city, but like I said, we are celebrating our 100 commercial references, so there's going to be a little cocktail reception just 5 minutes from here, so very short walk at 6 o'clock, and we'd love to see you there. Thank you for your attention.